All right. Well, welcome, Toby, to the show. This is Game Brigade Talks. This is like a podcast-like experience. So we're just going to be chatting a little bit here about Oathsworn. So,
Yes.
Toby, kind of introduce yourself and tell people who you are.
So for people that may not be familiar with me or the game, my name is Toby OHara, and I am co-founder of Shadowborne Games, and we created the game Oathsworn, which was on Kickstarter back in 2019, and we're getting ready for delivery in about 8 months, 7 or 8 months. So right around the end of September, early October, we should be seeing delivery. So it's coming up soon.
And so we originally had a delivery date, I believe that was May. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And we've had a little bit of a delay, and that's
Yep.
because of the production on the new HIPS models.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, it's essentially the machining time that it takes to create the molds for the HIPS plastic is actually taking much longer, like 2.5 times longer than what we had originally budgeted for it. And part of that has to do with just machining time. The other part of it is we're using the opportunity to fine tune a lot of the push fit joints to work exactly as we want them to. Because if we were going just for one type of push fit where you're going to push it together and never take it apart again, that's an easy tactic to take. You just design it to a specific dimension and you just slam it all together and throw it out the door. But we want certain joints to be very difficult to break apart or very difficult to separate, but then we want other joints that are easier to separate but not too easy. So there's trying to find that middle ground. So there's a little bit of back and forth, and that all has to do with the the arm resets and things like that. But even if we weren't doing the arm resets with the opposable arms and stuff like that, we still would have had about the same delay because, like I said, the HIPS machining process takes a lot longer. The reason for that is HIPS miniatures are created differently than your normal PVC miniatures that you're used to seeing.
So for people that aren't aware of what HIPS is, could you tell us what HIPS stands for and then kind of give a rundown of what these miniatures, I know I can't show mine, but you can show yours a little better.
Yeah.
What is HIPS? What makes them unique, and kind of why was your guys' process to bring this to light? Because I know there's not a lot of other board games that have even attempted something like this.
Yeah, so most board games typically choose a PVC miniature, and it predominantly has to do with cost, and it's cost of manufacturing, also cost of the material. So from a manufacturing standpoint, when you're going to create a PVC miniature, this is one of our companion models that you would use if one of your Oathsworn characters dies in combat. You bring one of your companions in so you can still fight the fight. But the way that these are created for any PVC miniatures, they actually take the sculpt from the artist and they 3D print the master. And then from the 3D print, they create the mold around your 3D print. And then it just goes straight to manufacturing. You just start, shooting it with blanks and filling it and injecting them out. So you're only limited in terms of detail is in terms of the resolution of your 3D printer. So if you have a super detailed 3D printer, you'll have a super detailed model. Now, PVC, which stands for polyvinyl chloride, is a softer plastic, so it's cheaper. It's that's why you have a lot of PVC miniatures. You'll see them come out of the box; they're all bendy, like spears will be going this way and that way, because PVC is softer. It's susceptible to heat, and obviously, when you're molding these things, they're warm. And sometimes there's some tricks you could do in manufacturing. You could actually pull these out of the mold when they're still warm to hold certain detail. But what you have is pieces that haven't solidified yet and pieces that have solidified, so you get warping. So that's why you'll see.
And they're also more fragile at weak points, right? If you have,
they're bent, so they're more ductile.
Yeah.
But they'll also reach. So it takes them longer to reach plastic deformation. So you have two types of deformation. You have elastic deformation and plastic. Elastic means it'll spring back beyond a certain point. But once you go too far, it becomes plastic, which means you bent it to a point where it won't spring back. So you can bend PVC a lot further before it goes plastic, but it's softer. So it doesn't necessarily break, it just bends more. It's just softer.
Makes sense.
Now for the HIPS minis, it's a much harder plastic, and HIPS stands for high impact polystyrene. So it's a totally different type of plastic. And there's a couple of downsides to it. One is cost. The cost is 2.5 times expensive. So if we made these two characters were the same and we made one out of PVC and one out of HIPS, just the cost of material for the HIPS is going to be about 2.5 times more expensive than the cost of the material for this. Also, the machining process, like I said, for creating these molds is you 3D print it and then just investment cast your mold around your 3D print to create your mold. So you'll pour molten metal around this thing to create your mold that then goes to the machine.
Yeah.
Whereas for hips, you actually have to machine all of this detail out of a hunk of steel.
Oh wow.
So you're limited. So not only does it take longer, because obviously 3D printing, it's just sitting there printing up the layers, and it might take maybe 45 minutes to create something like that. This can take a month and a half to machine because you've got to go in there, and it isn't. When you machine the detail for a hips miniature, when you're machining all those tiny details, you're not actually using what you would think of like a spindle bit, with like a really high speed turning, a fast spinning bit to machine away that metal. You actually use a process called EDM, which is electron deposition machining, where you're literally exploding the metal. So you use an electric spark to blast out the metal.
That's very interesting.
To machine that. But because of that, you get details. And as you can see on the warden that you're holding up, you get incredibly fine details with the EDM machining. So it takes longer. It's a lot more expensive. The machining process itself is more expensive. So the molds for a PVC model might cost you around $5,000-$7,000, but the molds for a hips miniature are going to cost you 2 to 3 times that. So not only is the material more expensive, but the molds are more expensive.
So obviously you guys chose that. This mini has a different feel and a weight than other minis that I've held. It feels more durable. It's interesting the weight behind it. But obviously you guys chose this. Is that because this feature of being able to swap gear, is this a better plastic for that? Is that the reason we decided to use this?
Yes, exactly. So with the PVC, because it's softer, it also means that it expands and contracts at a greater rate. So the shrinkage after you've pulled it out of the mold is about 2%, which obviously the bigger a model gets, that 2% becomes bigger, bigger, bigger. But with your hips plastics, it doesn't shrink as much. And we can hold very tight details. And when it comes to press fitting, the type of interference you need to hold in order to hold a press fit is on the orders of tenths of millimeters. So you can never hold that with a PVC miniature. You would only be able to hold that with a hips miniature. And that's where the press fit comes.
Not to get insinuated, I can't say this word very well, but not getting
inundated.
Yeah, stuck in the weeds here talking about the details. What I want to talk about really as a gamer is what excites me about the potential of this system.
Yeah.
Being able to take, and when I saw Oathsworn come up on Kickstarter and you guys talked about being able to have the armory and swapping your gear out for matching the gear that you have in your loot, I hadn't seen that before.
Right.
Have you felt like that was like a massive undertaking to be like, man, we want to be able to give the players a lot of options in terms of the amount of gear that they can have, but also we have to rein it in at some point and say, okay, really we're going to have 5 or 6 or 7 total poses that each character can do. Like, how as a designer do you guys find that fine line? Because, as me, I want as many as I can, but obviously production costs, you can't reach that.
Well, part of this was proof of concept. We weren't 100% sure how it was going to be done, but I have a big background in manufacturing. I have a lot of experience with plastics. I have a lot of contacts with that. Plus, I've got a lot of experience. I am a plastic fiend when it comes to Games Workshop plastic. I have thousands of dollars of plastic around this house.
Yeah.
Even just before you called, I was putting together my army that I want to use for my war game, or
your Death Watch.
My game of Warcry with my buddy.
Oh, Warcry. Okay.
Yeah. So I was putting together. So I've been a war gamer most of my life, not much of a board gamer, and those are two very different communities, because
yes, sir,
board gamers have very different criteria than war gamers. So this really comes from my love of war games. And when we were creating this, I pitched this very early on when Jamie and I were creating the game. I pitched this very early on. I said, I'm 100% confident that I can do this. I just got to find the right way to do it. And I know we could do it with hips. Hips is more expensive. Do we want to give it a shot? And we just kind of took a leap of faith and decided we're gonna stake our reputation on it. We weren't 100% confident. I was 99% confident, but there was always that 1% that said, if it doesn't work, what do we do? I'll find a way to make it work. There's a million different ways I can make this work and still be able to deliver options. So part of that solution where I said most board games go from around a 32 millimeter scale miniature. I said, let's just bump that up to around a 50. So they'll be bigger, but not massively bigger, right? So, I mean, we've got, here's a Games Workshop Primaris model, and then there's our Warden. He's bigger, but it's noticeably bigger, but it isn't massive.
No, I did see that there's a better video for that, I think in Update 49, where you actually break down the hips. You actually have that side by side. I actually really like the way the Warden looks alongside the Primaris, because his scale feels natural at that 50 millimeter height. It feels right.
It's not overbearing. It was just enough. And the reason why I wanted to do that was just when you take these apart, I was going for a minimum size of a peg to put into the hole. I didn't want the peg on the arm to go beneath 2 millimeters. Because I felt like 2 millimeters was kind of the bottom of the zone in terms of durability and strength. And that allowed us, based from there, I kind of scaled it up and said, okay, if we went to around a 50 to 54 millimeter scaled character, we'll be fine. Because at least that way, then it's really just a matter of mechanics and designing the right cut in the model to get that all to work. And then we were talking about the quantity. So we looked at our character range, and like you, I play World of Warcraft and all kinds of other MMOs. My main purpose for playing those is for transmogrification. I do transmog runs.
You want to look
cool. Exactly. I think I've got 40 characters on various stages through 5 different realms on World of Warcraft.
40? They're like 30 of them are max level.
Yeah, and 17 of them are max level.
Wow. So, well, they also just had a level squish, so I don't know. I don't know how hard it is. I play
a couple of weeks worth of Shadowlands because it just fell in the middle of all this stuff. But whenever we ship, I can get back into that. But so I'm like you. I want to be able to swap a bunch of stuff out. The other part of that was from a game design standpoint. We wanted every class to feel thematic and epic. So we didn't want you couldn't necessarily equip any weapon you want, right? We didn't want to have a witch wielding a two-handed axe. So we from a game design standpoint, we funneled what types of weapons every character class could wield.
Let me refine the question a little bit then. So I know in the battles, and I don't want to spoil anything, but there are opportunities where you're going to be getting custom drops, maybe specific to that creature. And that's gear that your character can then use. You're not going to have a rat's tail sword or something, I don't know, for the Warden, right? Because that's too specific. So are they just going to be more geared on, like, here's the basic weapons, a mace, a sword, a two-handed weapon? They're not going to actually represent, or are they going to represent some of the more unique pieces of gear? Or if that's spoilery and it can't be disclosed, let me know.
No, it's okay. It's so for the most part, the what we call the armory set for each character is designed and thematic to that character's design. So the Warden, for example, all of his weapons so the Wardens have, I don't know if you look closely, you kind of have that raven theme on their armor. He's got ravens on the pauldrons. He's got a raven thing on his chest.
I'll do a zoom in on my camera here for you.
Yeah, sure. Talk. So he has a very raven theme, and that's thematic to what that character class is in the book. You'll learn about it as you play the game, but all of his weapons carry through that theme. So we designed the models to be consistent with who the character was. But there are 2 characters that do have weapons that are the same thing as what you just killed. So
really?
There are 2 characters that do have a weapon option that is the same weapon that what you just killed came from.
Interesting.
So there are a couple.
I
was able to sneak a couple in, and I would have done more. But I was more concerned with the consistency of the look of the character across all the game rather than just one mission. So rather than making a rat tail flail for him, that he looks kind of dumb toward the end of the game. He still got the rat tail when he killed all these other things. So, but in the game there will be a card for all of those unique weapons. So even though He might have a sword that looks like his characteristic sword. There'll still be some sword that he looted off of or stole from something with a unique piece of artwork for that card. So his gear will be like that, but the model may not look exactly like what's on that card.
And to be honest, it's hard. I mean, we're used to, as board gamers, we're used to games like Gloomhaven that have a static model, right? Or most of these type.
Right.
So being able to even customize anything is really just a plus at this point. So yes, I think it'd be cool to have my rat tail flail for the creature I defeated, and as soon as I kill a crystalline beast and now I've got a crystal sword, you know, that would be cool. But the scope of that is just so hard, and I can't imagine.
Because like I was telling you, with the cost of these things to then start machining all these different things, those are all got to go into a mold. Those molds are expensive. But the truth is, this is really the first toe in the water of trying to really feasibly do this, right? We don't know if there's a market out there for this. We all think it's a great idea. We all want to see how it works. We all want to see how it feels. But until everybody has this on their table and they start using it, and then they can make a true call of, hey, do we really like this and we want to see it again? Or, hey, it was a cool idea, nice try. I wouldn't be interested in seeing it again. Then we'll know as a company, do we pursue this further? Do we then expand the weapon ranges for these characters and for all characters that we create in the future? So it's really going to be up to the community and the reception of how well received it is, how well do people like it, and if people like it and want it, there's a market there, then we will continue to support that in future games. And who's to say we don't create just a little armory expansion pack for like, correct, I'm sure we're going to eventually do another Kickstarter if this has the reception that we hope it has. Obviously we would want to bring it back to Kickstarter and try to, what was our total? I think we had like 12,000 backers total.
I have it pulled up right here, actually.
Somewhere around there.
But you also have some late pledges, right? So those don't reflect your late pledges, but it doesn't show.
So
you had 11,518 for the campaign. Now, it doesn't include late backers, obviously.
Right, and so if the game is reviewed well, if people love the game, then obviously there's a market there for it. So if we come back to Kickstarter, who's to say that we don't, create another armory set that expands it a little bit further that people might want? And, we're always paying attention to what people are saying, what people want. So we'll respond to that.
Toby, can I share a grievance that I have with the update 49? So you guys were specifically talking about the Warden, and you popped off his shield, and you said this shield will just pop off. But that's his shield. If you're going to use this arm, you use this shield. And I thought to myself, when I got this package, I thought, oh, how cool. He can have different shields. I can have a round shield. I can have a arrow shield. I can have a tower shield. So why limit to just the one shield? Is it, again, production cost?
It has to do with physical space in the mold. So there's two characters that have shields. Okay. And the two characters that have the shields
are they interchangeable? Could I take the other guy's shield and put it on this guy if I chose to? Not to interrupt you.
I'm trying to remember how I did that. It's a separate piece. Honestly, I don't know. You might be able to. I'm trying to remember how I did that arm.
I know I'm going to try.
I know I designed them the same way, and I know I would have used the same rough dimensions. I think it might have to do with how the
arm
when you look at the arm, how I made that clamping piece.
Yeah.
I would safely say no, but I'm not. I can't remember off the top of my head what that joint looks like.
It's okay. I backed you in a corner, so it's okay.
that's fine because we did consider it. We obviously did consider it, but it came down to space in a physical mold. So like every single one of these things has to have that space in the mold. On top of that, it's the Warden and the Penitent are the two characters that will use a shield. They also happen to be the two characters with the biggest weapon arsenal.
Yep.
So for their armory arsenal, they've got 12 total pieces.
Oh wow. Whereas
somebody like the Kerr, I think, has 8. So they were already maxing out the amount of space in the model in the molds to begin with, compared to some of the other characters. So and those other characters like our ranger, she just uses bows, right? So I had to give her 6 different bows just so that she felt like she was getting a fair enough amount of attention compared to the other characters who had like 12 different pieces
items
that you could swap
exactly
out with these. So when it came down to that, I would have loved to have put another shield in there, but I ran out of mold space in terms of what we were trying to look to budget. It would have put us over the top, but there's always room for expansion.
We had mentioned that the next character that I'm going to showcase here is a spoiler. So if someone is trying to steer clear of any kind of spoilers, timestamps down below. We'll have spoiler and non-spoiler. But I want to talk about this gentleman, this awesomely epic mini. And this one is specifically not, at least the copy that I received, transformable. I can't change any of his equipment.
No, he's PVC.
So
his weapon is a it's a harder version. It's not PVC. My mind's going to blank. It's a harder version of it. It's not hips and it's not PVC. I'm just blanking on what it is. But the reason for that is we didn't want that his mace handle to be bendy. So we made his weapons out of all of the characters in the game that are PVC. Their weapons are made of different materials so that they aren't bendy.
His detailing, I'm showing here on the main camera here, my close-up camera, is just incredible. From the chainmail to his little belt underneath, like his armor guards, to the candle-like thing on his back. Very impressed to see this amount of detail on a mini, especially when other large Kickstarters have nailed as detailed. Is this the quality we can expect from you guys with all our miniatures?
Yes, and if we're doing spoilers, I have other PVC.
We're still spoilers
here for other, like, this is, we'll do this so you can see it. Other
monsters and minions.
With their huge sides and stuff like that. And it's probably not a great.
Is the color difference going to do any different? Because I've seen you guys have some gray, and these guys are kind of this black, maybe a matte black look.
The very first production samples, I wanted to see how they looked in different colors. Okay. Because, so the ones that you're holding are not going to be what our final colors. They're too dark. They look too dark on the board.
Oh, I like them.
I agree with you, but when you get them on the board, because the board game of the Deepwood side of the board game of the game board itself is already dark, and you lose sight of some of your characters. So we're going to go with it'll be a more of a neutral gray,
light gray,
for the PVC. I was playing with different colors because I wanted to see what they look like.
I saw you guys had a glossy version that looked way too shiny, I think, on the update. I thought these matte black guys were so unique because you don't see that kind of coloring in a mini. So,
and I mean, we could literally make them any color we want. That doesn't change the cost. It really just comes down to what does it look like on the table, and what do people expect, right?
I think the light gray is probably a neutral, fine tone, and it allows people to paint fairly easily.
Exactly. Yeah, and it also you will actually notice a different detail level based on the color of the plastic. If you go too light, if you made those almost like into the white end of the spectrum, it's so bright that it chases away your shadows from the crevices, and you actually lose detail because it doesn't cast enough shadow. And then at the other side of it is if you go too dark, there's so much shadow you can't see the detail. Like these the hips, the most recent shipment of hips minis that I got with the armory pieces, they did them in a black color because that's just whatever they had on hand. It's so dark that unless you kind of look at it the right way, you don't get to see the detail.
You lose it.
Of the sculpt. Yeah. So it's those colors that you're seeing are me trying to pick the perfect color and find out what will work well to show off everything for the minis and make them look the best.
That's cool. So I wanted to talk a quick, end spoilery. End spoileries. So we'll
Is there anything else you wanted to know about him specifically? I could tell you one thing about him. Our manufacturer, we're using Panda Manufacturing. Yeah. After they finished his miniature, they actually said they think that's the best miniature that they've ever created.
Oh, it's incredible.
And there's still improvements I wish I could have made to him, and he's the type of thing that you'll see again. He won't just be in this game. He's a big piece of the game world, so you'll see more of him eventually.
We obviously, at least the backers, we don't really know the role he plays in the world. But when I got this mini, I was telling my wife, like, this is the character. If he was a playable character, I obviously don't know right now. This is the kind of guy that I want to play because he's just a dominating piece, especially compared to alongside the Warden. He stands a good couple of millimeters higher. He just is a presence on the board, and I have him not right now, but normally they're on my board game shelf because they're such a cool focal piece, I feel.
He is, and he's not just taller because it looks cooler. There's a lore reason why he's that
he's
big.
Bigger. Yeah.
They're a cool. They're really cool. So you'll learn about them, through the story, and there's so much that the game world that we've created there. We've got decades worth of digging to get to the bottom of this stuff.
In terms of releasing time, we were going to talk about, originally it was a May release. Not only is the hips kind of, obviously the production is longer, but you guys talked about in one of the last updates that you've had to really increase the amount of words per chapter from 10,000 to 20,000 just to give more agency to the players. Do you know much about that? I don't know if that's your realm in terms of the development or if someone else handles that, but what can you tell us about the journey and how you've gotten there?
Long story short is when we first conceived the game, let's just say that this is how much we wanted to fit in the box. By the time we got to Kickstarter, we had to whittle it down to this, just because even as
the scope
it is
too big.
Now, and the physical content of this. So our base game, if you got the base version of the pledge, which is the standee version, for the monsters, but you still get the character miniatures, that box is roughly the same. It's either exactly the same or it's like a half an inch bigger than a Gloomhaven box. Okay. So if you have the Gloomhaven box, that base game is that big. Then there's 2 boxes for all of the monster miniatures. So if you got the version that has all the monsters that you fight as miniatures, there's 2 more boxes that are the exact same size as that. And then
so 2 more boxes for just the monsters. So we're talking 3 Gloomhaven size boxes here.
Yes. Yep.
My gosh.
And then but we've sized them to still fit in their Calyx boxes for people that are worried about, if you've got Calyx boxes, so you'll still be able to fit them into your cubes and stuff. And then if you've gotten the scenery, there's another box that's about half the size of a Gloomhaven box for the scenery, which here is the tree.
Oh, nice.
And so now we designed the trees. This is an early prototype, so it's loose fitting. But it comes apart.
Okay.
So that you can pack it back down and take it with you. You don't have to worry about having a huge box. So they all assemble and disassemble. All the scenery all of the scenery is push fit and will assemble.
How many unique pieces of scenery are you guys including?
So there's 5 trees, 4 walls, and 2 huts.
And are they all unique, or are they going to, any of them are duplicate sculpts?
They're all duplicate. So the 2 huts are the same, the trees are all the same, and then the walls are all the same. But now, so for the hut, and here because it's appropriately
sized.
Appropriate. It's a size. We scaled it properly, but the huts themselves are also
removable. The roof comes off.
They're push fit. So you pop off the chimney, and you take off the halves of the roof. There
it goes.
But it's all up.
It's all push fit.
It all comes apart so that you can break down all of your houses, or all of your scenery breaks down so that you can pack it back up into a small box and carry it with you. So it's all push fit. It's all modularized so that you can, you don't have to keep all this stuff out on your table forever and ever. And don't worry about that. We took packaging and packed down very.
How tall is the tree? Do you know how many inches?
190 millimeters, I think.
190 millimeters.
Yeah.
So it's about 7.5 inches. It looks like around 7.5.
Yep.
Cool.
They're big. They're imposing, and they have a really great table presence. And it's that's what we were going for with the miniatures. We didn't. The reality is most Kickstarters with miniatures do far better than games that don't have miniatures. Correct. But we also recognize the fact that not everybody wants to shell out twice the amount of money just to get the plastic. So that's why we wanted to have an entry point that didn't include miniatures, which is why we created the standees. And the standees are going to look amazing. We use the same art that we've shown throughout the campaign. They have fully painted front and backs because facing matters in the game.
Yep.
So if you're at the back, the standee has a front and a back. And the artwork is Dong Junlu's artwork. It's phenomenal. So any artwork that you've seen of it for like the Broodmother artwork, that is exactly what the standees look like. And they're cut to shape around there. So they're not just huge squares or ovals or something like that. They're cut to shape around them. But we wanted to have a version of the game that, for people that didn't really care about the miniatures, but for the people that did buy the miniatures, we wanted to make sure that it had a huge table presence. So we were already going with a slightly bigger scale. And honestly, when you get this thing on your table and you have the scenery there and everything, it feels epic. Even though the miniatures aren't required to get the full experience of the game, once you have them, it just feels so much more thematic and epic and cool. And I sent all the miniatures over to Jamie. We did the white box testing for all the PVC miniatures, the PVC miniatures are basically done. They're going to start production, and those will be done long before the printed game is done. They'll just be staged waiting for that to go. But I sent them the official version with all the packaging, like the small box that I sent you that dude in that you like. That's the size of the box and the insert, so you can see how we're packaging all of the secret boxes. So when you're sitting down to play, it says go get box number 13. That box but it won't be a white box like I said. It'll have graphics on it. You'll go look for box number 13, and just like you did, you'll pull it out. It'll have the clamshell vacuum packed seal to protect all your models, and it'll be a surprise every time you sit down.
Is there a spot in the box at all to return these, or are we supposed to store them back in their white boxes?
They can go right back
into the white box.
Right back in.
Okay.
Yep. So all of this was designed to be able to take it out, play it, and put it all back in to its original box. You don't have to worry about finding space, or once you get it, everything is about back down and back out. Efficiency.
How does it feel to come? You're like right there at the finish line. You guys are almost done with your campaign. I feel like it's got to be very stressful right now, but you can feel it's almost there.
I don't give it much thought because we've been working on it for almost 4 years. It's more like attention. I get so focused on details that Jamie handles more of the project management. He's looking at the larger, where are we? I'm looking at more of the razor sharp. This is what we need to finish at this. This is what we need to do with that. So right now I'm just working on making sure that our file transfers are going well with the manufacturer, like all the tokens, and coming up with all the cut lines and stuff like that, and transferring all that stuff over. And then it's just kind of a waiting game for the machining process on the hips plastic to be done. But I don't think it'll feel done until it ships, because we're so razor focused on making sure everything is right that until it's in people's hands, I don't think I'll have a chance to take a breath. And it isn't because there's no real complications. It's just taking a little bit longer, but there's enough going on that I need to stay focused on it to make sure that.
And I know the backers at least can appreciate the transparency you guys have had on your pledge, like on your updates, saying, hey, we want to make this perfect, and this is kind of the issues we're running into. It's obviously taking a little longer to do the sculpting and the molding on these hips, so we're expecting at least a 3.5 month delay. We'll start targeting for an October release. I think that's fair, and I think the transparency has been very, very well received, at least from what I can gather.
And thank you, because the most important thing to Jamie and I is the relationship with the community, how the community is receiving us. Do they feel like their voices are heard? Are they valued? Do we respect them? So that's why we're trying to show everything that we can, even to the point where, a couple of videos that have come out for the press fit so far.
Yeah.
As I was explaining earlier, that the first ones that I handed out to everybody were the very first ones that came out of the mold.
Gen 1.
And I tried to explain this on a BGG. There was a thread on BGG that I was talking with everybody on. And I think of, in the world of machining, if you want something to be an inch long, no machine is perfect, right? So you always have to have a tolerance. So I want it to be an inch, but what if it's 1.01 inches? Is that okay? If it's 0.99 inches, is that okay? So there's tolerances. Our first pass at all of the PIPS models was to machine them to nominal. So if an inch is an inch. And we did that because we wanted to see where we started when we started to push fit all these together. Because like I was saying, plastic will shrink slightly when you take it out of the mold. And until you get it out of the mold, because everything shrinks differently based on its geometry and its sectional thickness and things like that. You can only come within a certain reason of predictability. So we machined it to a kind of the zero position, a nominal position, and then took them out of the mold and started press fitting them together to see how they felt. And those are what they sent to me. And based on that, I said, okay, this feels good, leave that alone. This one's too loose, let's make that one tighter. This one's too tight, let's make this one looser. So the first ones that I sent out, all of those miniatures are not optimized. They're either too loose in some areas or too tight. And the biggest one that had the problem was the Kerr model. This is the guy that's kind of like the rogue, with his double daggers. And his biggest problem was the way and you were saying before how these feel lighter.
Yeah.
It's because they're essentially hollow. You're only creating enough plastic to hold the form, whereas with things like PVC, they're solid all the way through. Okay. That's why the hips is a slightly lighter thing. They're also basically hollow, whereas the PVC miniatures are solid. They're solid all the way through. But the way that especially the Kerr model works, his chest, if you think of your chest, if you cut a line down your rib cage, down your sides, and you had a front and back half of your chest, that's how a couple of the miniatures are made. And the reason why you do that is so that you're going to have the arm that presses in there. You need a way to clamp the arm, because you can't have holes on a molded piece that are perpendicular to each other. So if your mold direction is right into the screen, you can't have a hole on the side because it'll be filled by your molding process. So I had to cut the bodies down the center to create the hole that the arms are going to go into. Now, for the Kerr model, there was a slight gap. It just wasn't tight enough right here under his armpit. And that one little gap, that even if I put it up to the screen, you probably barely see it.
Yeah.
It's so slight, but I could see it with my eye, which means that if you can see it, it's too big. That one little gap is enough to make this connection way too loose. And so we had them tighten that up. And then I got the second generation in, and it's infinitely tighter, and it does it exactly the way that I wanted it to work from the get-go. And that's just the process. So we sent these out probably earlier than other companies would have shown, because they weren't optimized yet. But I want people to see what we're doing to make them better, to build the confidence that A, we know what we're doing, B, that we know it's going to work, because it just took one edit of that one model to get it exactly the way that it needs to be for everybody to be able to use this push fit swappable weapon.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't even really showcase how these even really work. So I took apart my Warden here because he's the only one that I have. But the amount, like how easy it is to slide these in and out, and then they stay, has been incredibly rewarding. And so when I see people, the only thing I found with the Warden that I didn't like was the shield, because for the most part, when you have these guys on the table, nothing falls. They're very sturdy. But if you were to hit the shield, like if I was playing it and I kind of hit him down here, it's a little loose.
And that's exactly his problem. Now, there's two things to do that. Now, if you take off his arms,
okay.
Now you notice that his front and back, you can see the line down his sides.
Let me take off this arm.
Take that off on him. Do you see the line that goes down his sides? That's the two halves that's the two halves of the model.
Yep.
Take your thumb and forefinger, put your thumb on his chest, put your finger on his back, squeeze. You'll hear it.
Yeah, I don't want to break it though.
Okay. No. From his front, so literally put your thumb on his chest and put your finger on his cloak on the back, and just pinch. You'll hear it squeeze.
Yeah.
The reason why that's so loose is either from when I sent it to you, the vibration, or just by taking these things apart and putting them back together, he kind of torqued it. It's those things that the front and half clamshells of his body didn't have a tight enough press fit, so it's pushing that gap apart. So when that gap gets pushed apart, now that you've lost the grab for the arms. So if you squeeze that hard enough, then everything fits properly.
Interesting.
And that's one of the revisions that we're doing to go back to this, so that when these are assembled at the factory, when they do that first push, it should be tight enough that you won't have to worry about it. But if for some reason, if you were at, after you played a couple of times, you have one of your buddies that's just like a gorilla when it comes to handling miniatures, and he's swapping those things out on you, and he's cranking on it, all you'll ever have to do is pinch, like just like that, is literally just pinch the, take that off, is literally just pinch the halves together like that. You'll feel it, and the gap along his side will disappear, and that's how you know you've got the proper interference for that push fit. Once we get that push fit correctly tight enough, like I said, you've got the first generation, so it's a little bit loose. Once we've got those much tighter, the frequency of that happen will be drastically reduced. But like I said, there's always a chance that one of your buddies sits there and cranks down on the thing, because the hips plastic is lighter. It's also less ductile, which means if you crank it too much, you're gonna break it. So people, when they're handling them, might not understand that it's plastic, you could break it. Yeah. But if you start pushing on it too much, at least you know that if you start to push the things apart, that would compromise the joint for you to hold those arms in place. The solution is you just pinch it, give a quick push back in place. The last option is if somebody didn't ever want that to happen, is you could put a little dab of glue there at the joint, and it would never come apart again. But I'm not a big fan of going down that road, because if you ever wanted to take them apart, you wouldn't be able to do it again. So I'll have to send you the second generation of the stuff so you can see the difference, and you can see the different the weapons. Because
I'll take anything. I have them all over the house. Now. I would like to see some. I want to see the two-handed weapon. One of the things
I actually have one here for you, because that's my favorite kit for the Warden. Is his two-handed sword.
Look at that.
Let me see if I can do this so you can see it better. But this is actually my favorite loadout for the Warden.
That looks cool. Now that's a darker. That's the black arm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because they made them with whatever plastic they had on hand.
So the Warden has a movable head. How many characters will have that feature? Or is he just the lucky one?
No, there's a couple of them that have it just by the nature of how we design them. So the Warden has it. The Exile has it.
What about the Bear?
No, because his jaw. I had to make his jaw a little bit differently.
That's my guy.
Yeah, I know. It's if I had kept his jaw shut, I could have done it. But since we wanted the roar, I had to make him slightly different. But the Warden, the Exile, and I believe the Penitent, who's the other guy with the shield.
Yep.
I think they have heads that pop in and out that you could twist. Yeah, because everybody else I think has it molded into the torso.
What about the Witch? Because she has that cloak.
Not the Witch. So the Witch, she has her head. Here, I'll pop off her. Her head is part of her base.
Form. So yeah, it's done. Yeah, she doesn't move.
And I have her stuff here too. So right, this is her basic version.
I mean, I would feel like the priest would be similar, correct? As the Witch, he's also got a cloak.
I think the head of the priest might actually be like the Warden's.
Really?
He's got a cloak, yes, but I sculpted it so that
differently.
The back of his hood curled under, and I think that's where I put the cut line for the priest's head. So I think you can pop the priest's head off. But it's been so long since I've looked at it.
I feel like the Exile is one I always forget as a character.
The Exile, yeah, he's the
barbarian guy.
Yeah. So you've got this is the normal witch with her staff, and I've got her here with, if you want it to be a double dagger.
Okay.
Witch.
Yeah.
And then I've got all her other staffs right here. She's one of the characters that she's actually, two of her weapons are the same weapons that would be lootable off of people you killed.
Okay.
So she got the most attention when it came to the designs, but I've got all her different staffs and stuff like that here, and we're going to be showing all these in our monthly updates. We're going to do every month. We'll do a new every update. We'll do a full armory rundown of each character, so you can see all the different armory pieces and stuff like that. And
so how much?
They're a lot of fun.
How much do you stay up to date with other Kickstarter games or other board games in the industry?
Me, not as closely as Jamie. Jamie is more of the board gamer than I am. I'm more of the war gamer. And he's always got his finger, and he's being the game designer that he wants to know what everybody's doing, what everybody's working on, how was it received by the community and things like that. So he's far more closely in tune with what's happening on Kickstarter. But I'll know based on what, like you say, what Mike says, what Alex says, and Jesse and all those guys. And so whatever you guys are talking about is the extent of my knowledge of what's going on.
So obviously there's a big push right now towards boss battler games in general. And I think it's very interesting for a game that's not even released with Oathsworn. You guys are still being held as one of the pinnacle games where people are mentioning, well, does this compare to Kingdom Death? How does it compare to Oathsworn? And I'm like, this game hasn't even come out. I think it's very interesting how the community has really kind of backed this idea that you guys have created here, and the unique components. For example, like the dice combat or the card combat. How do you want to play it? So, for example, we're not dogging on the campaigns, but Primal has a card-based boss battler system, and you create your deck before you go into the combat. While Oathsworn, as you play the story elements, you may learn some weaknesses or differences about the creature, which lets you customize your deck. And I think just that little bit of nuance in terms of the story is just so interesting. Even though the same mechanical ideas, I think that nuance is very kind of interesting that you guys have kind of pulled off here to make it more realistic. I
guess Oathsworn was really born out of a love that we have for so many other games. Gloomhaven obviously influenced this game. The reason why we came up with a card-based a combat system that could use either dice or cards was because of Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven proved that people like to use cards.
The card mechanics of Gloomhaven is so clean, and it's very rewarding.
And at the same time, our dice system is very much a tip of the hat to wargaming combat systems because of the way of throwing dice, how it works.
You like throwing dice. You like to throw 12 dice.
I am because that's especially if you've got like an orc army and Warhammer or something like that, you're literally throwing 40 dice. That's all you have. But there's two worlds there that we're trying to our hope, and then we, based on our we did a lot of research. We just being lovers of games and everything, we knew what we liked, we knew what other people liked, but we wanted to try to bring those two worlds together for the one experience, because what we really wanted was to create a new world. We wanted a new IP. We wanted a reason for people to care, because I don't personally play games that I don't feel a personal connection to whatever's happening with whatever I'm playing with. So I play a lot of Warhammer, both the Age of Sigmar and the 40K stuff, but it's because I love those worlds. I've been reading the novels for my entire life. There's also another game out there that's a war game, Infinity. I don't know if you've ever seen Infinity, Corvus Belli. They're a Spanish company or a Portuguese company.
Is that the name of the game? Infinity?
It's Infinity. Infinity is the name of their game, but they have gorgeous skulls. And their miniatures look beautiful, and their combat system is really cool. But I care about that because they also did so much work on creating a lore for their world and for all their who the armies are and things like that. So when I'm playing those games, when I'm playing with my friends, and I don't really care if I win or lose. It's more about the thematic experience of creating a story that's going on there. So when we sat down to create this, we knew that we needed to create a world that was cool enough that people wanted to be a part of it, and we wanted to tell that story with it, and we wanted the big fight about monsters. So this was the marriage of the two. Let's have a huge story. Let's put the effort of having something that you can make choices as you go along. It isn't just like a typical dungeon crawler where you'll get a plate of story, you just jump in, you clear out your dungeon, and then you get a plate of story and you move on. We wanted it to feel active and you're engaging as you're going through it. Then go fight the fight, then let's go back to the story. And so it really is, it's two games in one. You could spend your entire gaming session for one night on the story, depending on what type of a group you have. If you want to fly through it, we have the instant action mode where it'll play more like a dungeon crawler, where it'll give you, 500 to 1,000 words of story that will still have choices in it. So we even still put the choices inside the shortened version. So we took 20,000 words, condensed it down to 750 words, but still put choices in there for you, so you could earn things like combat tokens, or you might even lose health going through this story because you fell down a shaft and you didn't meet your agility goal or something like that. So we wanted that to still feel like it was.
So I want to bring up real quick, because you're talking about the story. In one of your recent updates, there's a flow chart here that shows an example of a 10,000 word flow chart and the 20,000 word, showing the branching chains of decisions that you guys have created here, and how, I mean, it still all ends up here at the final resolution of the boss, but just the different situations that you run into is obviously unique. So I brought that up on the screen real quick. Other parts of it, though, that I don't think people are understanding the nuances is like your HP can be affected through the decisions that you make. You can find tokens that can, you know, they're tokens in that sense of the game, but maybe items that'll help you complete the boss or have an advantage coming into it. An ambush, you can set up a trap if you learn where the lair is or something. Like, you guys have taken the lore and the theme and said, we want to make this feel like you are hunters hunting a creature, but also make it, how does this work into a game sense that is kind of unique and interesting? And I think that flow chart really showcases that. Even though, yes, we're always ending up at the same story point, like this is the finale, you're not going to have multiple different finales, we'll have one ending, but the way you get there and the interactions or the way the game can change is very unique.
Yeah, and the reason why we always have it ending in the same fight is because there is an overarching narrative.
Story.
There is a story. There is there is an adventure that you're going through, but then there's also adventures within the chapters too. So that's why every fight has to be the way that it is. But what we were really truly trying to do was give you an RPG in a box where the dungeon, your DM is the game. So you're getting, and that's why we did the narration with James Cosmo, so that you can actually make it feel like a D&D experience. You know, you're going to create your character, you'll name your character, you'll name your free company, the name for your army, and you'll go through this experience as a character. You'll make your own choices as a character as you're going through it, and then the story responds based on the choices that you're making. Now you're talking about all those branching paths.
Yeah, I'll bring it back up.
Your first play session is only going to go through one of those paths. So there's an opportunity to go back there and get a different experience
for replayability.
So there's replayability there. But as you were saying, as you're going through this story, you could be earning combat tokens that make you stronger when you get into the fight. You might get into a fight while you're in the story, and you might lose some health. You might meet somebody that you want to bring on as an ally. That ally could be somebody who helps you in a future chapter, or it could be somebody that turns around and stabs you in the back while you're sleeping. There's your choice of who you bring into your free company, and the people that you meet are all going to be impacted by where you go, who you talk to, and then, you know, as the choices that you make. So is that person somebody I trust or I don't trust? Like I said, you could bring somebody in and they're all nice to you, and it turns out that they're a murderer, and you find that out in the worst possible moment, somewhere down in the story. But then you'll also bring in allies. So remember we were saying, as you're fighting the game, if I'm playing as the witch and I go unconscious during combat, I don't want to be sitting around watching all my friends finish the game. You would bring in we've got 4 ally characters. So we went with kind of generic sculpts so that it accompanied pretty much everybody. So that's why you have 2 male, 2 female allies. So you'll still be in the fight. You're still going to bring somebody in, but they don't have all the abilities your full character has. But there's still enough. There's still enough to do, to be a presence and to contribute. But so people that you're meeting in the story some of them will be allies that you can bring into combat. You know, what if you're playing the Adendri Ranger, which are the living plant people? You might meet another one of those Adendri Rangers who you could bring into combat, and she's not just somebody that swings a sword with a couple of dice. You might have an awesome weapon. So that companion is almost somebody that really could dig you out of that situation because you made the right choices or you did the right things as you were going through the story. And then we also have injuries, don't forget. So when you go unconscious, or even just as you're playing the story, you might have something happen to you that you break your leg. That will affect you when you go to play the combat portion of the game. We have injury cards that actually are essentially, for lack of a better term, they're ability cards. They're cards you have to play when you're doing your battle flow system. Remember the battle flow system with all the ability cards? Injury cards are ability cards that force something to happen. That'll say like, and whenever you have an injury card in your hand, you have to play it. And it'll say something like, you have a broken leg, you can only move 1 space or something like that. So you've got a broken leg for this fight and you can't run as far as you
couldn't imagine fighting the Broodmother with a broken leg.
when you got to run. Exactly. So that's the stuff. But that's the stuff you got to watch out for, right? And then there's curatives. So if you do have an injury, you can heal it, and it's a full experience.
The boss battler genre is generally defined as kind of a difficult system in the sense that we're trying to make it difficult for you to beat the boss, and the challenge in the kind of, I guess, the joy is beating that boss. Would you say Oathsworn is in that vein, or is it more about the narrative? Because you obviously are getting companions, right, to fill in that role. Because normally, okay, let me start over. When you die in normal boss battles, you're done. You got to start over. We failed. We obviously didn't take this right. Let's start it over. But this one, you're getting the companions, so you can stay in the fight, potentially win the fight, which gives me maybe an idea that maybe Oathsworn's direction's not in the enjoyment of making it difficult to beat it, but more of like it's part of the story, like this engagement is part of the story. Am I off on that, or what would you say?
The short answer is yes to everything, because that's why we created the different difficulty levels.
Yeah.
So we've got Jamie changed the exact name of each level, but we have on the hardest level, when you die, that's it. You're dead. You can't use that character again. So if you started playing as the Cur and you fell in combat, that dude is dead. You cannot use the Cur again for the entire campaign. And then when you run out of characters, that's it.
Yep.
Go back to the beginning, start all over. That's for the people who want a more grueling experience. On top of that, I forget what we call it. I think we call that hardcore mode or something like that. But on top of that, there's a difficulty level within the fights themselves. So every character, if you remember, the health system is always the same for your character. It's a D6 dice, so you can never have more than 6 health points. The normal way to play the game is actually set to 5 health points. You could actually play a harder level where you're set to 4 health points. And now if you think about going through that story, if you're starting at 4 health points and all of a sudden you lose a health point as you're going through the story portion of it, you just lost 25% of your health during the story. And you're coming into a fight with only 3 health. And that gets really difficult really quick. But the truth is if you're playing on that hard level, there's a higher chance that you're going to die, which means you may not get to experience the full story. And since we're writing and we want to give a full experience, we have an awesome story that we're telling. It's huge. Yeah. And it's 21 chapters. There's 21 and a half because technically we have the 0.5 chapter in there for the other Dendry, the other plant character class called the Grove Maiden, which if you decide that you want to add her into your free company based on the story, you put that in there. So in order to unlock her for your free company, you have to go through that story portion with her.
Like her side quest.
Exactly.
Her companion quest.
So there's technically 21 and a half chapters, but it would kind of stink. We're Kingdom Death players too, and we know the pain of fighting how many times have you fought the stupid goat? How many times do you have to kill that thing in order just to keep going? But we didn't want to have that for everybody. We want that there for the people who want that difficulty. But for people who, you've worked a 60-hour work week and you want to go have fun to play a game, I want to go kill a monster. I don't want to have to go, are we going to finally kill the Broodmother this week? It's been 2 months and we haven't killed her yet. We want people to be able to progress through the story so that you don't feel like you just wasted a 4-hour gaming session for nothing. So you have the choice of your difficulty level and the play style that you want. In there, it's all the rules are laid out for you and how you would do that so that you get the experience that you want out of it. So you can dial it up or you can turn it down on a whim, however you want to do it.
So as we wrap up here, Toby, this is the opportunity I like to give my guests to plug anything you guys are looking to plug or say anything you're looking to say. Obviously, this is here to support your guys' company, support the game. Is there anything specifically you want to talk about here as we wrap up?
Not so much, no. It's more of just a general heartfelt thank you to the entire community because as you were kind of touching off on before, the way the game has been received, we were truly blessed by an amazing community because nobody knew us before this came to Kickstarter. Gen Con back in 2019 was the first time anybody even knew that this game exists. That was the first time that we ever showed it to anybody. And ever since that day, we've just had the most amazing community of people who have come to the game that are active on both the Kickstarter forums and the BGG forums. So if people have any questions ever, we want to answer everything. As long as we're not giving up a spoiler. I'm active on the BGG forum, so if people have questions, I try to jump in where I can. And a lot of times, that's having such a great community. People will answer the question before I even have a chance to. So a lot of times, everybody else is answering it for them. But if there's a discussion, like there was a great thread that got brought up about the push fit minis based on the video that Mike did, and there was concerns, and I agreed with him because they were not fitting together properly, and the reason for that was it was the very first generation coming off the molds, and so we want to be able to make those improvements. So now that that's out there, I was trying to explain what we're doing and why we're actually showing everybody what we're doing before they're perfected. I want to show everybody how it is that where we start and the improvements that we make, so that people are confident that this is going to work. So rather than waiting 8 months before you get to see your first hips mini and everybody's questioning, do they even know what they're doing? Is this thing going to work or not? I'll show you that, yeah, it's working. And yep, there's improvements that we're going to make. And we're always taking the feedback. If somebody goes, that's hideous, if I can make a change on it, I'll make a change on it. I'll do anything I can. So if people have questions, we're there. We have our Facebook page, we have the BGG page, and there's obviously the Kickstarter page for the people who are the backers. And
I'll have all those links down below in the description. So if anyone's looking for that, easy clicks.
And all the feedback is welcome. I mean, even for yourself. I mean, you've seen the mini, and you've kind of explained the stuff you like. But is there anything that you've seen about any of that stuff that you don't like, that you'd say, I wish you guys had did this, or I wish you guys had changed that?
I mean, with me personally, no. I looked at them. You sent me two. The big guy. Everything about him was perfect in terms of what I was expecting. I loved it. Again, the only thing I had was the ability that I wish his shield stuck. Shield. I would like more shields, but the fact that his shield was the hardest thing to keep on in terms of playing.
And that's the preference.
And I think this might be a personal thing, but I will say it did take me time to get used to taking off these arms. You get a little nervous, like, oh, am I going to break this? Is this going to go in wrong? But once you get an idea for like how it fits in, once I've done it 2 or 3 times, I felt comfortable. But I will admit, the first time I put it in, I didn't want to take it out because I was nervous that I was going to snap something or break it. But then once I had to do it. Obviously, I had to, for the video, I wanted to make sure I could do it. And I got comfortable with it. And like, okay, now I understand. But I think that's just more of a human nature thing.
It's a great point. And that was the biggest takeaway that I got from putting out the videos and letting everybody touch them before they were perfect. I have learned that they're not as intuitive as I thought they were going to be. So what I'm going to be doing is, as we approach the actual date when we hit delivery, I want to put together comprehensive videos on every single character to show people how to pinch, how to push, how to correct, if you have a problem, so that people can be confident of how to play with these things. Because sure, I can put a little piece of paper in the box that'll tell you do this, do that, but I'll have videos that show you every character, all of their armory pieces, and how to handle them, and then how to troubleshoot them. If you have if something doesn't fit as tightly as you want, this is what you got to do to fix it, because it's because there's nothing permanent about a push fit. There's always a way to correct it, and there's always a way to improve it. So I'm going to do. That was the best. I think that was the blessing in disguise of putting out those videos before these were 100% ready, is that they're uncovering all those things that I may not have caught before. So it's giving me an opportunity to then put together a good instructional toolkit for everybody of how to handle and how to play these things, because it's a different. It's like if somebody handed you a cell phone, you'd never used a cell phone before. How do you know how to use the thing? Somebody's got to show you. So if you've never played with hips minis and push fit models and how to deal with this stuff, well, somebody's got to kind of show you. So it's a perfect opportunity to do that.
Well, I'm glad you guys obviously are learning something. I didn't finish King of Average's video. I know he got quite a few. I actually watched that video and I said, dang it, I should have done the same thing. Why didn't I make a video? I just totally blew my mind.
No, it's fine. I'll get more out for you so that you can get them when they're fitting much
perfect
the way that they were designed to be fit, and when they've got the range of weapons, so you could really try it out and see.
You can just send me the whole game. Just send me the whole thing, and then I'll just start playing now.
You and me both. I mean, as soon as like nobody wants this game on people's table more than Jamie and I, because aren't. We're so confident that people are going to love it. We're just excited to see what people say. Because
Have you
even the
guys-
playtesters are just like, I can't wait to get my hands on this.
Are you guys kind of getting close to like thinking about a second Kickstarter for another game in Shadowborne's title? And it doesn't have to be Oathsworn. Have you guys like been? Do you have product lines ready to go or what?
No, because we're 100%. This is the most important thing in our life.
Okay.
We've discussed what we're going to do next and how we're going to do it and about what the timing is going to be, but we haven't done it yet because this has to be perfect. If there's even the smallest mistake, like this is the foundation of our company. If we don't get this right, it doesn't matter what we do after that. So
Correct.
Right now we're focused on that, but I mean the most logical thing that I think would pop up after this delivers is a second Oathsworn Kickstarter. If this gets received well, as long as it doesn't get panned and people say this thing sucks, then obviously I think that would be the most logical thing in terms of a pipeline of what's ready to be done, because there's nothing else in the pipeline for design-wise that's ready to go to Kickstarter. So, all
right, Toby, I'm going to throw you on the spot here. So be ready for this one, and I apologize for doing this. But as I wrap up a video, I always do a hashtag and a word. And that word is what we use for the giveaway for the $99 Oathsworn pledge that we're giving away when we reach 4,000 subscribers. So I'm going to ask you if you can think of a word to put the hashtag that our viewers can put down into the comment section.
How about push fit? Make sure it's hyphenated.
Hashtag push fit. Make sure it's hyphenated. That yes. Guy, there you go, guys. That will be the word for the comment section down below. If you guys want to leave a comment down there, let us know what you guys think, and leave a comment for Toby. I'm sure he'll be checking out the comment section and look for any questions or concerns.
Whatever questions are.
And we will then go with that. So, Toby, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with us about the game. Yeah, obviously there's a lot to talk about. I can't wait to sit down again as we get closer to the release and kind of really diving deeper into everything you've got going.
Definitely. Sounds good.
All right. Anytime. Talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
See you.